Well, hi there folks. About 3 or 4 weeks ago I posted a short, don't make many shorts, but a short which announced my intention to build a 4-motor mini Lidl RC conversion, but using differential thrust as a method of controlling yaw. I said it was a crazy idea. The question is, did I succeed? Well, what follows is a very quick look at my build log and my efforts to try and get the differential thrust working. And then at the end, a couple of test flights in very unsuitable windy conditions for a model that weighs around 100 grams with the LiPo in it. I'll give you a little preview of the Maiden, and one thing I can tell you is it's a very durable model. In other words, it bounces well. And if you want to skip straight through to my summing up of the project and the Maiden, it's at about 16 minutes or so into the video. I'll put chapters down below. Anyway, let's get on. Here's the build. You can always skip through and there are chapters below. But did I succeed in getting this crazy little plane flying? And why did I start? Well, I had one of those cheap little foamy chuck gliders kicking around, plus a whole host of brushed motors and speed controllers and bits and pieces, plus, as usual, bad weather in the UK. So I figured it might be time for another mini little creation. Well, I've already been through a single motor version, my twin version, my 4-motor version. It's actually built with a tiny little quadcopter board in it. And then we've got the super mini version of the little chuck glider. And of course my lovely mini little biplane flies like a treat. And even a swept wing version, my mini little hunter. I'd already mentioned I've done a 4-motor version, but with a quadcopter board. And this was flown by differential thrust, and climb and descent was purely throttle. And it actually worked too. But the idea this time is to build one with 4 motors, but as I said at the start, using differential thrust for directional control and 1 servo for elevator. So in that case I'll have proper control of direction and proper control of height. And I reckon with 4 of those motors it's going to be quite a speedy machine. So I've already got here 2 pairs of motors, 2 brushed speed controllers, FS2A receiver, and I've got 1 9-gram servo. Bit of a shame, I'd much preferred a 2-gram or something in it, but I've already got these. Spacing's going to be a bit difficult because these are a bit big for this actually, but I might be able to find a couple of smaller props in there, providing I've got some here that will actually fit that particular diameter shaft. So just giving you a bit of a heads up, I'm not going to do a detailed build blog. There's loads of build blogs for all of those that I showed you on my channel. So don't go away, I'll come back when I've made a little bit of progress. Well, that's a stroke of luck. These here are the right diameter to go on this shaft. So hopefully I've got 2 clockwise and 2 counterclockwise, because obviously you have props contra-rotating on the 4-motor or twins come to that. So I'm going to sort out the props. That's a good start actually. So there we are, smaller props on these, and now a quick test to see if I've got the rotations right, because these small brush motors do have a preferred direction of rotation, and usually when you buy them there's an indication of which is the positive and which is the negative connection. And as I can see here, I've got them both on the right way. Like I say, plan is, I'll test the other 2, plan is to connect each of these controllers to a different channel and do a differential mix, but more of that later. I'm going to test these 2 now and then start work on hollowing out the fuselage on that mini Lidl and figuring how I'm going to wire this all together. And I've got those right as well. And one advantage of this kind of system using differential thrust is this whole setup is powered by 1S's, and each one of these brushed speed controllers has its own little tiny 1S. So it's not a question of one of these tiny little 200 milliamp batteries powering 4 motors, because I don't think it'd work. In fact, that's quite warm now. But anyway, I'm now going to start work on hollowing out this fuselage and trying to begin to install 4 motors. Okay, my method of hollowing out, just made a little tool with a bit of stiff wire, heat it over the gas, and carve, and you get a very nice, tidy, clean cut. Just be careful not to go right through. Plus, I've also, the last few of my Lidl builds, I've got into cutting the main middle section out of the wing, because for one, it saves you hollowing it out, and for two, it's less work. But you do need to glue it in well all the way round, as opposed to normally on some of my early builds I just put a few hot glue tacks. Straightened the tail where it was bent by pouring boiling water over it and then bending it straight and running it under a cold tap. Next job, install the 4 brush motors in the wing. Right, so here we are, 4 brush motors fitted, and I've managed to get them lined up properly in all planes. The trick is to actually move them around a little bit while the glue is just going hard. So that's fine. Also managed to get the wiring through the wing by using a hot metal rod and pushing it through. You've got to be careful doing that because very easy to make a hole. I did. Next step, of course, is to glue the wing in. Right, well, we have some success, but a word of advice: if you're doing this on a big model with big props, don't do it with the props on, because in the course of my mixing at one point I connected batteries and the props went full on one side. Before I show you this actually working, my differential, let me show you what we've got here. We've got 2 brushed motor speed controllers, and we've got a tiny little micro FS2A receiver, and the speed controllers are plugged into channels 3 and 4 on the receiver. That is because the way the mix is organised, and I've been doing this for a good couple of hours, the way the mix is organised, mix 1, master is channel 3 because that is the throttle usually, slave is 4, master is 4, slave is 3, positive mix 50%, and mix 3 negative mix minus 50%. And that seems to work because, let's see what happens when I fire this up. Both lots of props working.
So a short while later, I managed to get all the electronics installed into the fuselage.
You can hear the change in pitch as I go left right with channel 4, which is of course rudder channel. So that is working. Which means I can now figure where my 3.7 elevator servo is going to go, because as I said before, the plan is differential thrust and elevator. If we go by about 1/3 of the cord, somewhere here, I'll come forward a little bit. That looks about right to me. That looks about right to me. Plus, if there's going to be the weight of a little control wire there and control horn. And I can always trim by moving those little lipos a bit further, a bit back. But well pleased with it so far. First thing to do before fitting the elevator servo was to make the elevator though. And instead of using foam board, which I've used on my single mini before, I used a nice thin bit of balsa, which was much more suitable. Right, well, leaping forward a few days, elevator servo is fitted and my lovely little red balsa elevator is fitted, but I'd also carried out more tests, and sure enough I discovered that as I opened the throttle, the power balance between port and starboard motors changed, which would have meant if you were trying to fly it you'd be constantly having to make corrections. So I ordered a pair of matching speed controllers from AliExpress. They're only about £2 or £3 a time. So I've got to solder up the connections to those. Quite a tricky little soldering job. Right, and there we are folks, matched pair of brushed motor controllers there. Matched pair of 250 milliamp 1S lipos. I must say soldering these little connections is pretty tricky, and I've just left that so that you can see the circuit boards there, but I'm going to put some hot glue on the connections there and some heat shrink over as well to give it a bit more reinforcement, because I discovered before that these are very fragile connections, and I did actually manage to break 1 or 2 when I was experimenting before. As you can see, Connections to motors are via these tiny mini JST, and in my initial tests here, as you can see, no offset set in the mixes now. They fire up at the same time, which looks good to me, and thrust is changing as I move the rudder. Hear the change in pitch? So it's looking very promising now. I think this might well work. Well, so much for my matched pair of brush speed controllers. That's two I've burnt out now in the course of my mixing. But anyway, I did have another spare one kicking around, and I've made some little progress, I guess you could say. Opening the throttle with a little offset, all four props are working, and if I move the rudder to the left, you can hear a change in pitch there, because it will turn left. Those are speeding up. Problem I've got is not sure that it's actually turning right. If I hold it by the vertical stab, open the throttle, you can see now rudder to the left, it's swinging left. Problem I've got is nothing's happening. Not working very well when I go to the right. Right, well, I've increased the offset a bit on mix number one. And I think it's behaving really nicely. Yes, I think I might have got it. I think I'm done with mixing and experimenting. So anyway, I'm going to try and tuck these in here in a nice tidy fashion. I already figured out before where the centre of gravity would be with these two lipos in the nose, and a tiny little bit of lead it needed, 5 grams of lead, and then it's going to be time for a maiden. So at this point it looks pretty much finished and ready to fly, but I had a little brainwave. At the beginning of this I suggested that 2 separate lipos, one powering each ESC, was a good thing, but in fact, thinking on it further, what it means is, as they're old lipos, and if they go down unequally, then it will be different level of power to each lipo. So I made a nice little Y lead, and instead of powering it with two 250 milliamp lipos, I powered it with one 600 via the Y lead. But I'd also discovered that these kind of ESCs don't behave in the same way that brushless ones do. But I won't go into that now, it was far too complicated. But I think I may have prevented a potential problem there. But I also came up with a far better way of testing my equal thrust to see whether I had some chance of this working. And it wasn't exactly great news. You can maybe see there why it's... No, I've still got a problem. I've still got a problem with it. It's very tricky to fly. I've still got to get this balance right. Let's try changing an offset in the negative mix. Whoa. Oh, we've almost got it there. Nope. No, this is... Maybe I've got myself an impossible task here. Let's see, I'm going to drop that down to 7. Well, finally, after trying numerous mixes, I've actually got some kind of result here where I can open the throttle and the thrust seems pretty equal both sides, or maybe not, as I spoke. Going beyond half throttle it actually starts turning. But anyway, I've got something like a result. Let's say if I keep the throttle about here, moving rudder right, it's turning right, moving rudder left, it's turning left. So I've got something that kind of vaguely works here, but far from perfect. But I'm going to go into those mixes that I've made and try and reduce the percentages so that it's not quite as twitchy. But I mean, it's going to fly. Whether it's going to be controllable is another question. Having suspended it loosely like this and seen how difficult it is to even get it to fly straight, I think this is just not going to fly. I mean, I'm having to work amazingly hard there on the throttle stroke rudder to actually get it to point even in a straight line. So, as much as I'm reluctant to say it, having spent a couple of weeks on this now, I think it's time to declare that my idea of a mini Lidl controlled just by elevator and differential thrust with 2 pairs of brushed motors has been pretty much a total fail. I feel somewhat obliged to give it a maiden, which I think is going to be pretty exciting. But if my suspicions are correct, I think it's going to be probably a total fail, and it'll end up with a servo in the middle for the ailerons and just 4 motors paralleled and an elevator. If anyone's got any suggestions for good mixes that I can do with 2 brush motors and just the 4-channel receiver, please stick them in comments below. But I think it's time to stop waffling on. Brace yourselves, because here comes the Maiden. I did make it extra challenging because it was quite windy and gusty for a little plane that actually weighs 100 grams, including the lipo. Anyway, what do you reckon? Is it time to quit, or should I give it another go and spend another week or 2 trying to find the right mix for it? But while you're thinking about it, brace yourselves, because here is that Maiden. Right folks, well the time has come. Finally, after 2 or 3 weeks of trying to get this amazing, silly, rather crazy project of mine working, my 4 brushed motors but with differential thrust steering, after 2 or 3 weeks of frustration and trying to get this balanced, I finally, within a whisker of giving up, I've decided I'm going to give it a little test fly before I actually change the whole idea and fit an aileron servo in the middle. It's the reason I've chosen short grass is because I've lost props before in the long grass with these, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to have a lot of trouble controlling this. It's actually quite a lot windier and gustier than I thought it was going to be, so I don't think I've got more than about a 10% chance of even getting this to stay in the air for more than 10 seconds. Let's see how I get on. I'll give it some up trim just to make sure it goes up. Right, so what's the betting I even managed 10 seconds? Woo! I'm going to give it about half throttle and see what happens. Whoa, and not even 2 seconds. And I haven't lost a prop, touch wood. No, I'm going to give it 1/3 throttle and a high throw. Well, 1/3 throttle, 1/3 throttle, and it flew straight, because the problem I've had with it is, with the differential thrust, I can balance it and then the thrust level changes as you're opening the throttle, which means of course it's constantly changing direction with throttle as opposed to just with the rudder, which was the idea. So I'm going to give it a 1/3 throw. Whoa, did you see that? I actually got control there and started to turn. I keep forgetting that the way I've organised my mix, it's rudder to control direction, so I'm going to give it another go, but immediately hit go to rudder. Oh, it's gusting up now. I've got no chance, have I? I'll wait for a little lull. Half throttle. Oh no, I still forgot to go to rudder. Let's give it another go. Right, well, the trick is launch it with some right rudder to try and keep it going straight, and then I'm going to give it elevator. No. No. The only good thing about trying it here is soft landings.
No, it needs maximum up trim, high rates. Oh, damn it, man. I'm not getting far with this, am I? Ooh. Ooh. Oh, that was a good one. How many throws before I totally give up? That's the question, chaps. Right, well, actually the guts are falling out of it now as well after that impact. Right, I've gone into sub trim and given it loads of up. It's way too windy. I'm going to give it one more go and then call it a day. Wow! Oh, I managed 4 seconds then. Okay, somewhat encouraged by the 4 seconds, I'm going to give it another go. Give it some right. Whoa, hey man. Got too much up now. I'm getting too far away. Right, the problem was then, too much up elevator. I'll give it some down trim, but I think I managed probably something like 8 seconds then. So I'm going to give it some down trim, have another go, but it was getting a bit far away from me there and I didn't particularly want it to go into the bushes on the edge. But that was a slight improvement. Perseverance pays off, you might say. Whew. So part of the problem I've got here is, as I say, the only way I could get my mix to work was by using left stick rudder to change the differential thrust, and I'm not used to that. So at that last flight, because I was using elevator on the right to try and keep it off the ground, I was kind of forgetting I was using the rudder to control direction but giving it way too much elevator. So I'm going to give it some down trim and then we'll have one last go because it is too windy and it's actually gone very cold again here. Plus, I discovered before that you don't get much flying time with 4 brushless motors on a 600 milliamp 1S. Okay, so it's takeoff with lots of right hand rudder. Whoa, that was about 8 seconds too. At least I've discovered the trick of taking off. Right, 8 seconds with about 2/3 throttle, a bit of right rudder, and this time I remember to give it some elevator control. Right, 2/3 throttle, bit of right rudder. Oh, as you can see, I'm still struggling. Problem is, as I change the rudder, you're also making slight changes in throttle level, which of course is changing the climb, and 2, it's changing the direction as well. So you're constantly balancing throttle, elevator and rudder. But I think we'll call that a 25% success, but I'm going to give up on the idea of the differential thrust, go back home and fit an aileron servo. I've got a 2 gram servo at home that's going to go nicely there, and I bet this would fly beautifully as a conventional 4 brushed motor mini Lidl. And if you want to see that next successful flight, why not hit the old subscribe button down there? And if you've enjoyed the video, please give it a like, helps my algorithms. Anyway, I'm going to go home and have a cup of coffee and warm up because it's pretty chilly here. But that's all for now. Hopefully I'll catch you all again later. Bye for now.